Hey everybody, the ASUS Dark Hero was finally in stock and I was quick enough to buy one before it disappeared into the ether like Bigfoot slinking away into the forest. Today I'm going to unbox and go over the premium X570 motherboard and see what makes it worth that $420 price tag. Welcome to the middle of nowhere. The Dark Hero is a refresh of the ASUS X570 motherboard, the Crosshair VIII Hero. And if you're looking to save money, you can still buy the original for less than the Dark. One of the more significant changes ASUS made to the Dark Hero is the removal of the chipset fan, replacing it with a large surface area heatsink, which is great for two reasons. One, it's another component that won't fail, and two, it's another piece you won't have to clean. Here are some other differences I found while researching the two motherboards, which may sway your purchasing decision. The Dark Hero has out-of-the-box Ryzen 5000 CPU support, so there's no need to flash the BIOS. The Dark Hero also has 7.1 channel surround sound versus the 8 channel found on the original, and while the power delivery on the Dark Hero keeps the same 16-phase or 14+2 setup, ASUS upgraded the MOSFETs to 90 amps compared to the 60 amps found in the original Hero. This change was done to better support the 5000 series CPUs, and then finally, there are some aesthetic differences as well. The Dark Hero is well dark, gone are the silver accents, and instead of the word Hero being lit up on the I/O shield, we get ROG instead. I would have loved it if ASUS had made this an LED screen like they've done on some of their other high-end motherboards. This way you could display whatever you wanted, be it system information, a logo, or a GIF, to truly make the motherboard your own. That's right, I said GIF. Alright, let's switch gears and see what's in the box. As always, before we get into the specifics of the motherboard, I like to go ahead and open it and see what's in the box, and also just kind of go over the box itself. The box to the Crosshair VIII Dark Hero is mostly black to maintain the dark theme, but also has a stripe of red and a giant ROG logo, which is also holographic. The holographic logo reminds me of the gimmicky covers many comic books had in the 90s. It's definitely eye-catching and will stand out should you be perusing the motherboard aisle in a brick-and-mortar store. The front also contains some pertinent information such as the CPU support, chipset, and other features. There's nothing really of value on the sides of the box, but the back does contain specification information as well as some images, one of which is for the rear I/O. Rather than an anti-static bag, you get an anti-static plastic shield, and once you remove that, you get complete access to the motherboard. The motherboard is easily removable, so that's always good. And it looks like we do get an anti-static bag that you can actually at least rest it on. Oh, don't even need to actually take the motherboard out, so that's kind of cool too. So if you're just trying to get to what's underneath it, you can go ahead and put that right back in. What's included in the box is a ROG coaster, another ROG coaster that also serves as a CD-ROM for drivers, and it looks like it has a case badge in there. Some stickers. You can use these to either augment the looks of your case or also for cable management. These will come in handy right there. It's actually kind of stylish. You get a nice fat manual, which I'm always a fan of. This will have all the QR code stuff, as well as breakdown pretty much everything about the motherboard that you need to know. This is also available online as well. And underneath that, we have more accessories. Let's see here. We have our Q connector. Use this to plug in all the front header connectors and then plug this into the motherboard. It's a little quality of life thing that makes building your PC just that much easier. You get some M.2 stands, 4 SATA 6 gigabit per second cables, 2 of which are right angled, your Wi-Fi antennas, an extension cable for RGB strips, and another extension cable for addressable RGB. And that's all that's in the box. Now let's go over the motherboard. The ASUS Crosshair VIII Dark Hero is an ATX motherboard and measures 305mm by 244mm. It supports a wide variety of CPUs stemming from the latest and greatest Ryzen 5000 CPUs all the way down to the Ryzen 2000G CPUs. You'll find 4 slots for your RAM on the Dark Hero with dual channel support. You can install up to a maximum of 128 GB of RAM, which is great for those needing that much memory, but who cannot afford to step up to the Threadripper ecosystem. This motherboard also supports a wide variety of RAM speeds. However, keep in mind the sweet spot for Ryzen 3000 and 5000 CPUs is still DDR4 3600. From both a performance and price perspective. While you can maintain a 1:1 Infinity Fabric ratio with Ryzen 5000 CPUs using RAM speeds beyond 3600, in some cases all the way up to 4000, the performance gains usually aren't worth the added cost, and the system can become less stable. Additionally, faster speed RAM tends to have slower CAS latency timings, further reducing any advantage the faster speeds might provide while also being much more expensive. Having said all that, if you can afford and want to tinker with high-speed RAM, go for it. Otherwise, stick to a 3600 kit with low CAS latency. On a side note, if you're only using 2 sticks of RAM, remember to install them in the slots marked DIMM_B2 and DIMM_A2, or the second and fourth slots when going away from the CPU, so you can take advantage of the dual channel speed. When it comes to PCIe support, you'll find a total of 4 slots. The top slot is by 16 in speed and length, and the slot below it is by 16 in length and by 8 in speed. If you're using a Ryzen 3000 or 5000 series CPU, you'll be able to take advantage of the Gen 4 speeds these CPUs provide. Using a Ryzen 3000G, 2000, or 2000G series CPU will restrict you to PCIe 3.0 speeds. Both of these slots also feature ASUS's safe slot technology, which is basically a fancy way of saying they are reinforced with metal to prevent heavier GPUs from sagging or even breaking the slots. To keep the by 16 speed, I recommend you install your GPU into the top slot. The bottom 2 slots both operate off the X570 chipset and are both PCIe 4.0. The longer slot is a by 4 speed and by 16 length slot, while the smaller is a by 1 speed and length slot. The Dark Hero provides loads of RGB support. There are 2 4-pin 12V RGB headers and 2 3-pin 5V ARGB headers located at the top and bottom of the motherboard, which should provide you with ideal locations to connect your RGB peripherals without too much cord clutter. Additionally, there are 2 zones of lighting on the motherboard, the ROG logo over the chipset heatsink and the ROG text by the rear I/O. Both the motherboard lighting and any RGB strips or fans connected to the motherboard can be controlled using ASUS's Aura Sync software that is embedded in their Armoury Crate program. While I have not had a chance to experience the Armoury Crate software, I have used older versions of Aura Sync with my Crosshair VIII Hero, and I'm not a fan, to be honest. It's very light on features and just not the most user-friendly. I can say I'm glad ASUS has teamed up with Corsair to allow certain motherboards and GPUs to be controlled by their iCUE software, which has many more features and allows you greater control over your fans and lighting. As with USB ports on the rear I/O, I love when a motherboard has loads of fan headers, and the Dark Hero doesn't disappoint, as there are a total of 8, and they're all PWM. At the top, you'll find headers for the CPU, CPU optional, and AIO pump. If you do choose to cool your CPU with an AIO, particularly a 240mm or 280mm AIO, you'll install the fans into the CPU and CPU optional headers, and then put the pumps connection into the AIO pump header. You'll find 3 chassis fan headers here, here, and here. Additionally, there's a high amperage fan header should you need to use a more power-hungry fan, but you can also install a traditional 4-pin fan here as well. Finally, if you're building a custom water-cooled PC, there's a dedicated 4-pin header for your DDC or D5 pump, and right next to it are 2 2-pin headers to help you monitor both the liquid flow rate and temperature. I do wish ASUS and other motherboard makers would go the gigabyte route and make all their 4-pin PWM headers hybrid, meaning that you can plug any device that uses the 4-pin PWM connector into that header. This way you can use it for a fan, a water pump, etc. and put it wherever you want. Making a header have a dedicated purpose restricts where you can plug in the peripheral. You definitely won't be short of storage capacity with the Dark Hero. There are 8 SATA 3 or 6 gigabit per second ports, which will allow you to connect plenty of hard drives, optical drives, or other SATA devices. You'll also find 2 M.2 slots on the motherboard, both with included heatsinks to keep your drive temperatures down. The M.2 slots can operate at PCIe 4.0 by 4 speeds should you have a Ryzen 5000 or 3000 series CPU. Other CPUs will operate at PCIe 3.0 by 4 speeds. Both slots also support SATA 3 drives. If you want to set up a RAID array, the Dark Hero can accommodate. You can set up RAID 0, 1, or 10 through the X570 chipset with your SATA devices. You'll want to download the RAID Expert 2 configuration utility found on the product support page, and also consult the RAID configuration guide, which you can find by scanning a QR code in the Dark Hero manual. In addition to all those fan headers and RGB headers, the ASUS Dark Hero has loads of internal connectors, buttons, and switches. First, let's start off with power. The 24-pin ATX power connector resides on the right side of the motherboard, and in addition to an 8-pin ATX 12-volt power connector at the top left, you'll also find a 4-pin supplemental CPU power connector. While you must plug in the 8-pin power connector, you really only need to plug in the 4-pin should you overclock your CPU or if your workload demands more power from it. Having said that, it won't hurt to plug in both power connectors from your PSU to the motherboard. Just make sure your power supply can accommodate this. From these images, you can see two Seasonic power supplies. The first only has one 4+4 CPU cable, while the other has two. The second will let us plug into both the 8-pin and 4-pin CPU power or EPS ports. Moving on to the USB headers, you'll find a total of 4. Right below the 24-pin power connector is a USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C front panel connector, which has speeds up to 10 gigabits per second. Below the Type-C connector and a fan header is the USB 3.2 Gen 1 front panel connector. It's at a right angle, which is nice considering how bulky the cable is. Should you need a low profile option, there are adapters, and I've put a link to one in the description below. There is only one of these 3.2 Gen 1 connectors on this motherboard, unfortunately, so if your case has 4 USB 3.2 Gen 1 ports on the front, like the Lian Dynamic XL, you won't be able to utilize all of them. This is a shame, as I've seen other X570 motherboards with 2 Gen 1 headers. Finally, there are 2 USB 2.0 headers at the bottom of the motherboard. At the bottom of the motherboard, there are loads of internal headers. Starting at the bottom left, you'll find the front audio header for your case, mic, and headphone jacks. This does support HD audio. Moving past the fan header, which I've already covered, is the LN2 jumper. I have no experience with extreme overclocking or LN2 cooling, but the Dark Hero can be used for this if you're one of those people looking to shatter CPU speed records. According to the manual, enabling the jumper will help remedy the cold boot bug during post to help the system boot successfully. Skipping over the safe boot and retry buttons, which I'll get to in a bit, is the TPM or Trusted Platform module. Here you'll connect a separate module to this header, and you activate it in the BIOS. A Trusted Platform module helps further secure your computer by storing passwords, keys, and other data, as well as helping with network security. I plan on doing a dedicated video on what a TPM is and how to use it in the future, so get subscribed so you don't miss out. If you're interested in buying a TPM for the Crosshair VIII Hero motherboard, I've put a link in the description. After hopping over the RGB and ARGB headers, you'll find the node connector. This is a proprietary connector from ASUS that allows your motherboard to communicate with and control other devices. Through the course of my research, I've not been able to find much information, but from this 2018 tweet by ASUS, it looks like you can control aspects of PSUs, connect fan hubs, and assume control of products from partners. Finally, we come to the last 3 internal headers. Here you'll find the front panel connector for your case's front panel cables. There are connections for all the usual suspects, a power and reset button, as well as power and hard drive activity light. Right above that is a 4-pin speaker connector should you want to plug in one of those. The Dark Hero does not come with the speaker, so you'd have to purchase this separately. The only real reason to connect an internal speaker is to monitor troubleshooting beeps, and explanations of what the beeps mean are found in the manual. Finally, you'll find a 2-pin thermal sensor header to connect a sensor to so you can monitor temperatures. The Dark Hero has a lot of buttons and switches, and if you're a normal user and not an extreme overclocker, you won't even need to use all of them, but it's always good to know what they do. First, let's start with the 2 buttons every user will probably use at some point, and these are the start or power and reset button. You'll find these at the upper right of the motherboard. You can use the start button to turn on the PC, shut it off, or put it to sleep depending on your OS settings. The reset button will do just that. Reset or reboot the PC should it freeze, and your case button not work. However, this is also labeled as a flex button by ASUS, meaning it defaults as a reset button, but within the BIOS, you can set it up to turn Aura lighting on or off, activate safe boot, or enter the BIOS. I like that ASUS gives you options with this button. The next buttons and switch are aimed mostly at overclockers as previously mentioned, and all of them can be found at the bottom of the motherboard. The safe boot button will let you get into the BIOS to adjust your OC settings if you keep crashing. When pushed, it applies safe settings in the BIOS while still retaining your overclock settings. Once you're in the BIOS, you can then tweak your overclock and try again. The retry button comes in handy should the reset button not work while overclocking. When you use it, the computer will rapidly reboot several times while retaining your settings in an effort to successfully post. You'll want to enable the slow mode switch should you do LN2 extreme overclocking, and when used, it lowers the CPU frequency and stabilizes the system so you can collect your overclocking data. Another overclocking feature ASUS has included on the Dark Hero are Probelt Measurement points. Use these in conjunction with a multimeter to detect your PC's current voltage and OC settings. These can be used during overclocking. I can't really say much more beyond that since I just don't have any experience using these or doing enough overclocking. However, it does sound like a nifty feature to aid those who do. The Crosshair Dark Hero has onboard LED lights for both monitoring and troubleshooting, as well as a Q-Code LED that will display a 2-digit error code, which you can then look up in the manual or online to see what might be wrong with your PC. There are also 4 Q LEDs just below the Q-Code LED. One is for DRAM, which lights up yellow, the other is CPU, which lights up red, next is VGA, which lights up white, and boot is yellow-green. If you can't boot to your OS, or even if you can, and one of these LEDs remains lit, something is wrong. Use this information as a troubleshooting starting point. For example, if your RAM isn't fully seated, the RAM LED will stay lit and you won't get any further in the boot process until you fix it. If you're looking for good onboard audio, the Dark Hero comes correct with the ROG Supreme FX 7.1 surround sound high-definition audio S1220 codec, as well as the EESS ES9023P, that's a mouthful, high-definition DAC forefront audio. You'll be able to drive headphones with an impedance of 32 ohms all the way up to 600 ohms using the rear audio jacks. Additionally, the included audio on the Dark Hero has shielding technology that blocks electromagnetic interference, which reduces noise. It utilizes Japanese Nichicon audio capacitors, has gold-plated audio jacks for cleaner connection, and has dedicated audio PCB layers. All these features help to ensure you will have a great listening experience without needing to rely on any external audio solution. On the software side of things, ASUS's Sonic Studio 3 will let you further tweak your listening experience. Now we come to the rear I/O of the Dark Hero, and boy does it have loads. It's one of the many reasons I wanted to get this motherboard. One of the first things you'll notice is the integrated I/O shield. I love this feature and wish it was implemented on all motherboards, not just the more premium ones. At the top of the rear I/O, you'll find the BIOS flashback and clear CMOS buttons. The BIOS flashback allows you to install a BIOS update without booting into the existing BIOS or OS. You can also update the BIOS in the BIOS itself or within the OS using ASUS's Easy Update software. I've had most luck updating the BIOS on my Crosshair VIII Hero within the BIOS itself, either by locating the file on a USB drive or downloading it from ASUS within the BIOS. For full instructions on how to use the BIOS flashback button or just to update your BIOS in general, consult the manual. The Clear CMOS is a great tool to use should your system encounter problems after overclocking or even setting the XMP profile on your RAM. You'll find this button either on the motherboard itself or on the rear I/O on most X570 and some higher-end B550 motherboards instead of the jumper you'll find on lower-costing motherboards. Below the BIOS flashback and Clear CMOS buttons is the Wi-Fi antenna connectors. The Dark Hero has Wi-Fi 6 enabled, which means it's compatible with 802.11a, b, g, n, ac, and ax standards. The Dark Hero also has Bluetooth 5.1, another great feature, and it will allow you to connect Bluetooth headphones or your smart devices to your computer. Next up are all the lovely USB ports, and there are 12 of them, which is awesome. 4 are USB 3.2 Gen 1, which have a transfer rate of 5 gigabits per second. Then there are 8, yes 8, USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports, one of them being Type-C. These all have a transfer rate of 10 gigabits per second. Unfortunately, there are no USB 3.2 Gen 2x2 ports, and these all have a transfer rate of 20 gigabits per second. I would have loved to have seen 1 or 2 of the USB ports be a 2x2. There are 2 LAN ports on the Dark Hero motherboard. The first Ethernet port is 2.5 gigabits per second and uses the Realtek RTL8125-CG solution. The second port is 1 gigabit per second and uses the Intel i211-AT solution. Finally, we come to the rear audio of the motherboard. You'll find 6 audio inputs on the back. 5 are gold-plated jacks, and then there's an optical out. The 5 jacks are advertised as lighting up as well, which is a nifty little feature. With these outputs, you'll be able to set up 2, 4, 5.1, or 7.1 channel sound, and you can see how to do this in the manual. If you plan on keeping things simple and will only be plugging in headphones and a microphone, use the lime and pink jacks respectively. As with all the other motherboards I've covered, I just want to take a moment to talk about power delivery. This was a big focus by ASUS. With the Dark Hero, their goal was to improve power delivery while maintaining low temperatures, and also resulting in improved performance, more stability, and better overclocking. This is supposed to be an overclocker's dream motherboard after all. The Dark Hero has a 16-phase or 14+2 VRM with 90 amp power stages. The heat sink covering the power delivery components is large, uses a heat pipe to help with dissipation, and ASUS uses a high-quality thermal pad to aid in heat transfer. All this translates into good heat dissipation and low temperatures for your VRMs when the CPU is under load, which is a good thing. According to a Tech Power-Up review of the board, the author was not able to get the VRMs to go above 45 degrees Celsius in his VRM torture test, and the idle temps were around 20 degrees Celsius. Ultimately, a good power delivery and cooling solution means you'll be able to sustain higher clock speeds for longer when putting your CPU to the test with demanding workloads. Additionally, if you plan on overclocking, you'll have more headroom to push your CPU even further. The ASUS Crosshair VIII Dark Hero is a great looking motherboard with a neutral aesthetic that will go well with most builds. All the features it offers will make a wide variety of users happy. Power users will appreciate all those USB, NVMe, and SATA connections, and overclockers looking to break CPU records will love the beefy power delivery, sensors, jumpers, and switches. The expansive CPU and RAM compatibility also ensures nearly any configuration will work. A passive chipset heatsink and a redesigned power delivery are great additions, and I look forward to seeing ASUS implementing this design in future motherboards. Finally, I want to particularly give props to ASUS for the quality of the user manual. This thing is amazing. I've been using the PDF version to further research the motherboard, and I can say it will help any user out there, be they a veteran PC builder or a novice. The descriptions are to the point, easy to understand, and there's even a build guide. Having said all this, I do wish this motherboard could hold 3 NVMe drives instead of just 2. I would have been perfectly happy to sacrifice 2 or 4 SATA ports for one more x4 M.2 slot. I think that many users are trending away from using 2.5-inch or even 3.5-inch storage devices, and it would be nice to be able to further remove cable clutter by having one more M.2 slot. Finally, after doing all this research and really digging into what this motherboard is and has to offer, if you were to come up to me and ask Seth, should I spend $419.99 on the ASUS Dark Hero motherboard? My answer would probably be, probably not. But Seth, you'd say, you've spent all this time going over this motherboard and pointing out all the things you like about it. Why shouldn't I buy it? Simply put, if you are an average PC user or someone on a fixed budget for your next PC build, the Dark Hero is simply too expensive when there are other motherboards using either the X570 or B550 chipset that have many of the same features as the Dark Hero, and sometimes other features it's lacking, while costing much less. However, if you saved up the money and really want this motherboard like I did, then go for it. I do think it's rather good and will serve many people's needs quite well. As always though, I urge you to be a discerning consumer. Do your research, evaluate your needs and budget, then buy accordingly. And that's all I have to say about that. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button and share any questions or comments you have down below. Show your support for the channel by clicking subscribe, and don't forget to hit that notifications icon so you don't miss out on any future content. Your support and feedback are greatly appreciated. Also, check out the video description as I put links to the Dark Hero and some alternative motherboards in there as well. I'm Seth, and I'll see you next time in the middle of nowhere.